Hello everyone, this is Jotto, and welcome to the Hearthstone Weekly Show. Now, as I said last week, this week we're doing a series from ESGN Fight Night. Now, I may do a second one, because there are a couple of interesting series. This week we're doing the Darkwonyx versus Savjz match. I finally figured out how to say that. Savjz. This was the second series. The actual total thing of Fight Night, I won't spoil it because some people haven't seen it, but there were 2 3-0s and the rest were 3-1s on both sides. But yeah, it was pretty close. It was a pretty close setup, and it was actually a very good episode of Fight Night to watch from a viewing perspective. Now, the reason I picked this particular series is one, it's between two of the, as they're sometimes called, the Titans of Europe. I mean, Darkwonyx captained the Mana Grind team, and he's also the captain of the Mana Grind EU team. And Savjz is sort of the best European player on Doggy House. That's coming from people on Doggy House, not just from me. So it was a very interesting coincidence that they managed to both get into the both match, because it is done by a wheel. It's not actually picked. It is done by a wheel, so it was a good coincidence to get this kind of matchup, and that's why I wanted to do it. The other one I might do at some point is Chaki and Artosis, or maybe the final sort of team versus team thing. I might do that as well next week, but we'll see. Depends if there are any other events that I want to cover. Anyway, without further ado, let's get started with the first game. So, on to opening hands. We have Darkwonyx is playing a Druid, and Savjz is playing a Miracle Rogue by the looks of it. Now, these particular hands, this is before mulliganing. Savjz is going second, which is very good for him. We're probably going to see the Leroy Jenkins get mulliganed, and the Cold Blood. I think you can probably keep the other two. The SI7 and Shadow Step are a little debatable, but I think you can keep him. As for the Druid, you just mulligan the Ancient Lord and the Cairn, and I think that's pretty basic. Okay, he's going to mulligan the Shadow Step as well. He probably wants to draw those later for Gadget down as opposed to keep them early. It's a good idea to keep the SI7 if going second, however. Alright, opening hands. Earthring Farseer is a decent early drop. We've got Tinkmaster. This is pre-nerf Tinkmaster. So Tinkmaster is going to play a fairly large role in a lot of these games, and Nat Pagel is also pre-nerf. Now, for Savjz, we also saw Preparation, Fan of Knives, and I think a Backstab. One other card, we'll see it in a second. Yep, no Backstab. I think opening hand-wise, Savjz does have the advantage here, but we're just going to see some draw passing for a couple of turns here. Hero power on this one. An Innervate would really mess up the tempo of Savjz, because it's quite difficult to deal with innervated targets without saps in your hand. The question is he going to cycle this Shiv? I think it's probably better to. You don't have that many options in your hand right now. Well, I mean, you have a lot of options, but you don't really have that many useful options. And he cycles into another Shiv. That's quite funny. Okay, from here, I think we might just see the Earthring Farseer come out. Just get something on the board, force him to deal with it. The problem is if you throw out an Earthring, it's probably just going to be backstab hero powered. And you're at full life. Really debating this one. I think I would go ahead and throw out the Earthring, force my opponent to deal with it at least. Get through some of his cheap spells so he can't Gadget and draw with them towards the mid game. Now the question is, are we going to see Backstab SI7 or Backstab Hero Power? Alright, we're going to go for the SI7 here. I think that's just because he wants to make sure that his hand is basically full of useful spells as opposed to creatures. Also saves him a little bit of life, which might be relevant considering Miracle Rogue is all about racing. Now for here, we're just going to see this thing get Wrath and a Hero Power, I should imagine. There's no real decision making going on the first couple turns between these two decks. But it really does start to pick up from turn 5 onwards, because you got a lot of the big cards in the Druid deck come online, like Druid of the Claw and Azure Drake, and Gadgetzan comes online for the Rogue. I think we're just going to cycle Shivs. Yeah, there's nothing to target at the moment. Bit of a slow couple early turns. The sap is going to be quite useful. Does he attack with a dagger? I don't think he does, in case he draws deadly poison. But we shall see. I don't think he does at this point. There's not really much point to attacking right now. Okay, so we're going to see a druid come out here. I'd actually put it in charge, and I know he has a sap, but if you put it in charge, it baits eviscerates, which is crucial, because they need eviscerates to win. And it also means that you start putting pressure on, and you can burst them down pretty heavily with the druid deck. And now he can't sap it, he has to eviscerate it, basically. We could see a Fan of Knives eviscerate to deal with this thing. He could coin as well, but you want to save the coin for the gadget's end. So yeah, we're just going to see an eviscerate come out here, and effectively what happened there is he got rid of an eviscerate and dealt 4 damage. And we might just see exactly the same play next turn. We might just see another one come out here. I would not be surprised. I think we will. I think we're just going to see another druid come down in charge in the cat form, which is a very, very rarely used form, actually. The bear form on that druid is usually used. But I think we're going to see cat form druid come down and keep applying pressure. And he top decked the second eviscerate, so we're going to see an exact replication of last turn. He's going to Fan of Knives eviscerate. Now, Darkwonyx is extremely far ahead at the moment. Very, very, very far ahead. Why is this? Because if you look at the options, he's done 8 damage with these druids, got rid of 2 eviscerates, which is 8 damage on the opponent's side, and he's out of AoE. His opponent now doesn't have any other options left. In fact, you could just innervate out the Cenarius. The only thing it's vulnerable to is Blade Flurry. So innervating out the Cenarius would probably be the best play here. There's so many options gone for the rogue in his actual deck that there really aren't that many ways of him dealing with the Cenarius with 2 different treants. So, the question is, what does he do here? The Cenarius is actually a very, very, very difficult target to deal with. Now, this really does leave Savjz in a really bad position. There aren't any good plays here. He could backstab a tree, and that's pretty much it. He has useless spells in his hand. He has a bunch of deadweight spells. This is one of the problems with Miracle Rogue. He's got 2 preparations, a Shadow Step, and a Cold Blood, and Coin, and Leroy. The only card in his hand that's actually live is the Sap. He's going to use it on the Cenarius, but then if he replays the Cenarius, he is pretty much in a lose-lose situation right now. I should imagine we're just going to see the Azure Drake Harvest Golem here. Azure Drake to draw, and then Harvest Golem straight afterwards. Oh, Mark of the Wild comes up. I think you still go for the Harvest Golem over the Mark of the Wild here. Yeah, he's already attacked, so he's just going to go for the Harvest. Yeah, I think I agree with that. An interesting thing about this particular deck that Darkwonyx is running is that it does have the 2 Mark of the Wilds. I have been running Mark of the Wild myself recently, and I do quite like it. So it's an interesting tech that a lot of the Mana Grind people have been employing. Now, this hand is not getting better. He has used a lot of his resources, though. It's not just that he had a bad hand. He actually had a good hand, but he spent a lot of his resources early. And now we're at sort of the point where Miracle Rogue can burn itself out if it doesn't draw continuously, because all of its spells are very, very cheap, but they're very, very low impact as well. On this turn, I actually don't see what he can do. He can sap something and pass. There aren't any options here. He could probably sap the Azure Drake, even though you're giving your opponent card advantage at that point, but you need to get damage off the board. And that's literally all he can do. There really isn't anything else. He only has 1 life card in his hand again, because he has a bunch of other cards that just don't do anything in this situation. I think that spending both Fan of Knives early was a mistake. He should have used the coin for one of them. He's relying too much on Gadgetzan at this point, and he's getting punished for not drawing it. Now, I should imagine that we're just going to see Cenarius come down here, buff both of those creatures with Cenarius, hit in for 8, and then your opponent's dead next turn. I think you want to buff instead of summoning 2 more taunts, because your opponent doesn't really have a way of dealing with one single large creature anymore. He can, however, draw Blade Flurry, so it's better just to go with the buffing. At this point, I think we're just waiting for Savjz to die a very, very slow death. The funny thing is about this hand is that even if he had a Gadgetzan, this hand wouldn't be good. He'd just cycle through his whole deck. If he had a Gadgetzan, he'd just cycle 6-7 cards in one turn. But he doesn't have any resources left in his deck. He's already spent a lot of them. The resources he has left in his deck, he has an Assassin's Blade, which he couldn't play with a Gadgetzan anyway. He has a second Shadow Step. He's got some Deadly Poisons and a Blade Flurry. And Edwin Van Cleef, and that's it, basically. He doesn't have anything else. Yeah, he's just cold-blooding and conceding. He didn't have anything he could draw. He needed Eviscerates in that particular situation, and he wasn't going to get them. I think that's the main point there, is that he wasn't actually going to get them because he already spent both. I think spending the Phantom Knives that early was a mistake, but it really did show one of the problems with Miracle Rogue and why it isn't sort of a tier 1 deck at the moment, is that it runs out of resources really fast without Gadgetzan. It's not as consistent as the other decks, where, I mean, if you look at the actual decks, Darkwonyx's Druid deck, for example, still had a lot of damage left in the deck. He really hadn't spent that many resources all game. He only spent 2 Druids. He had 2 Druids, an Innervate, and Northern Farseer, really, and a couple of Wraths. That was it. Really didn't spend that many resources, and Savjz just ran out of them. That's one of the problems with the Rogue Miracle deck, and that's probably why he chose it first. He just wants to maybe get a free win with it, but it doesn't always work that way. So, moving on to the second game. Savjz brings out his Druid deck. He did have a Warrior as well. I think the Warrior has a little bit of a sketchy matchup against Druid pre-patch because of Tinkermaster. Post-patch, I think it would have been about even, but pre-patch would have been a bit of a problem. So, out of opening hands, now Darkwonyx is going first, and that hand looks amazing, but I would actually send back 1 Harvest. You don't want to go turn 2, Sun Fury, turn 3 Harvest, turn 4 Harvest. It's just awkward. You want a Chillwind Yeti or something else. So I would send back the Harvest Golem, but the rest of the hand is very, very good. As for Savjz, we have Sun Fury Protector, it's a keep. And then I would send back the other 3 personally. He's debating keeping the Ancient Lore, but he shouldn't be. Ancient Lore is very, very powerful, but it isn't going to do much for you for the next 7 turns. At which point you have drawn through basically a third of your deck. So you're probably going to draw 1 anyway. He is debating it, but I would just send it back. Snap, send it back. Okay, so that hand is better than it was. He can go turn 3 Yeti. And Darkwonyx's hand is fairly workable. It is very, very workable. Now, we're going to see one of the stupidest draws he could have got there, also known as the turn 1 Yeti. Now, this is the single strongest opening in the entire deck, more or less, is the turn 1 Yeti, or turn 2 Yeti. And at that point, most people, especially on stream, were saying, oh, it's a good game. No, this game does go on. It does go on past here. This doesn't end the game in any way. But it was very, very interesting to see sort of how powerful the Yeti was. And this is something which has been a bit of a problem with Innervate. A lot of people don't like Innervate because you can power out Yeti and Druid of the Claw, and it just messes up the whole game. Now we're going to see Sun Fury from both players here. I would say that Savjz should be keeping the board clear. he should just take out this 2-3. No point in playing aggressively. You're not going to win by playing aggressively with a turn 1 Yeti. What you want to be doing is clearing the board and consolidating your board position and consolidating your tempo. But no, he is actually starting to take out creatures. And for Darkwonyx, I would just put down the Harvest Golem. Put down the Harvest Golem, it won't die, and just pass the turn. Force your opponent to attack your own creatures. There is an argument for Earthring Farseer, but then if he Wraths it, it's a bit of a problem. So I would say Harvest Golem. Keep the Earthring for later. You can even say Mark of the Wild. That's another option. You could say Mark of the Wild, but then if you Mark of the Wild again, if he has a Wrath, and then he just attacks, then you're so far behind at that point, you can't really come back. So I think it's Harvest Golem and hope for the best. Yeah, Darkwonyx is a pretty calculating player, although he does play much faster than a lot of the other pro players. Now, this is where the problem lies. If he had killed the 2-3 last turn, he'd be able to kill the Harvest Golem this turn. Easily. He'd still have a 4-1, a 2-3. But now he's just going to go ahead and clear this Harvest Golem and attack. But he should have a lot of he should have a very, very large board advantage right now, but he doesn't. Now, there's the swipe. To be honest, it didn't really matter whether he drew the swipe here. He did have the Mark of the Wild. But the swipe helps out a lot. Now, we're just going to probably see just a swipe on the Yeti. Kill the 2-2 with your 2-3, and then pass. And at that point, your opponent went second, and he's behind on cards. More or less. Or you're even on cards, because of the way the Yeti was used. So I don't really agree with a lot of the more aggressive plays. He got in some damage, but the damage doesn't really matter. Damage in Druid versus Druid only matters once he gets to low life. Early on in the game, damage really doesn't matter. You get a lot of incidental damage as opposed to anything else. Now, we're probably just going to see Shapeshift pass. Next turn, he wants to go for an Ancient Allure. Okay, so they're about even on cards at the moment. I would say that Savjz has a bit of a stronger hand overall. We're just going to see a Druid come out here. Bearform Druid. Bearform Druid is very, very difficult to deal with for a Druid. Weird. Kind of weird if you say that one. Anyway, but Druid of the Claw in Bearform is very, very difficult for a Druid player to deal with. They don't really have that many removal spells for it. They have to really brute force it down with minions as opposed to spells, or 2-for-1 themselves in some way. It's a very, very powerful card in the mirror. It's a very powerful card in general, but in the mirror matchup especially. I should imagine the other place thinking of is Earthring Farseer or Mark of the Wild, but I would think I would just run out the Druid here. Run out the Druid. You can heal up your own Druid with Earthring Farseer or something else you can do. In future turns, obviously. It's one of the advantages of running Earthring Farseer as a tech card. It gives you some extra healing against aggro decks, and it also gives you sort of a combat heal. Now, I would put this in bear form. He is debating the cat form because he does have a Mark of the Wild, but I think bear form is more powerful in general against Druid. He doesn't need to press damage, so yeah, he's just going to go for the bear form. Now, we're going to see the Innervate Ancient Allure here, almost definitely. Just cycle the Innervate, cycle the Ancient Allure, get you some extra options, and get you a 5/5. Now, in this situation, mouse in the middle of the screen. Good job, Jotto. Anyway, in this situation, we could see a Hero Power. We could see a Mark of the Wild. I think the Mark of the Wild would probably be a better play. My reasoning is just because it stops your opponent from really taking it out with base removal. It goes up to 8, goes down to 3, and then you heal it back up to 6, which means your opponent's back at where they were, whereas otherwise then it would go up to 4, which is swipeable. So I think Mark of the Wild into Earthenring Farseer is the correct play here. And the Swede agrees with me. Okay. Now, Savjz has a lot of options, but he doesn't really have that many he really wants to do. He doesn't really want to Tank Master it, because if he does, it could become a 5-5. He doesn't really want to play Yeti and give it taunt, because it will just die. I think he might just have to gamble the Tank Master and hope for the best. The other option is Druid of the Claw with taunt, but even then it's a little sketchy. I think the safest play is Sunfury Protector with Chillwind. The risky play would be Tankmaster, Sunfury. He's going for the risky. It's a Devilsaur. That's a problem. He can't deal with a Devilsaur. That's a big problem. Yeah, and he doesn't look too happy about that. Can't blame him. But it was a gamble. I think the safer play would have been better in this situation. I mean, there is a Black Knight in Darkwonyx's hand, but Savjz doesn't even know that he has a Black Knight, and his Druid list doesn't run a Black Knight, which is actually a bit of a shift. It runs Ragnaros, and it runs Ragnaros over Cenarius, and it runs it just doesn't run the Black Knight. I think it runs a second Azure Drake over Black Knight. Is there only one Azure in Darkwonyx's list? Yeah, it does. It runs second Azure. Now, from here, I think we're just going to see a board clear. There's no point in playing the Black Knight. Just board clear, put out a Harvest Golem. Yeah, put down a Harvest Golem, attack the 2-2 with a 5-5, attack the 2-3 with a 3-3. And you can even play the Blood Mage just to cycle it and Hero Power. And then you're really far ahead on board. This Black Knight's going to be pretty crucial considering the Druid of the Claws in Savjz's hand. But yeah, Darkwonyx, he's, as I said, he's a very calculating player. He's the kind of player who goes over pretty much every single possibility before doing something, and he's thinking about the Black Knight play, but then he's thinking, wait a second, there's Druid of the Claws that haven't been dealt with, so I need to deal with those. He even checks deck sizes at times. That's something else which a lot of people don't do, because you need to think about the probability of your opponent having certain cards in their hand. And I think he is going to go for the Blood Mage. Now, if you actually look at this positioning, he's put the Harvest Golem in a position where if the 3-3 dies, then a Defender of Argus could actually buff both. Now, this is sort of redundant because in this particular list, there isn't the Defender of Argus and he's already used a Sunfury, but it's actually a good habit to get into. I've said it in the past, it's a very good habit to get into. Interesting thing here is that he's not going for the full board clear. He's actually going to go for the face and push damage instead. I do find that intriguing. But anyway, it's a good habit to get into to go for a Defender of Argus positioning. It also makes your opponent think you have a Defender of Argus, so he has to play around Defender now because of the way that positioning was done. So he has to play around Defender of Argus now, even though there isn't one in Darkwonyx's entire deck. Which is a very interesting sort of state of affairs. Okay, so we're going to see an Azure Drake. I think he's going to have to put down the Druids at some point. But he just doesn't want to. Alright, he's just clearing the board as much as possible. Yeah, I agree with that. He has to clear the board as much as possible. Make sure that Savage Roar is not lethal. Which it would have been, basically. He does have the Force of Nature Savage Roar, which is essentially lethal. I think we're going to see the Harvest Golem attack the 2-2, the 5-5s, go straight to the face, and then a Wrath Hero Power to take out the Azure Drake. At this point, he's presenting lethal next turn. He's presenting lethal next turn with the Fun Roar. We are going to have to see a Druid of the Claw come out here. He doesn't really have a choice. He has to throw out a taunt. He's getting way too low. But he's just dead to Force of Nature Savage Roar at this point. Just dead. He has all the options in his hand, but he just has no way of dealing with the current board. So I'm not sure if there's actually a way of him surviving here. I mean, he is running he's running more of a sort of watcher list, so to speak, as opposed to a Druid Beatdown deck, which it does have a lot more options defensively, but it doesn't really have a way of dealing with things that get large, like the Mark of the Wild. You get to Tinkermaster and Mark of the Wild, and he's suffering for it. Although the 6/6 would have been even more an issue. The question is, what does he do? I mean, he's going to probably run out the Druid of the Claw and then Hero Power. He has to Hero Power, I think, to live. His opponent has, well, 14 is Force of Nature Savage Roar. And then on the board, he has another 7 and another 4. 18, 25. 26, 19, yeah, he's just dead. He's just dead. We're going to see Force of Nature Savage Roar here. One of the Treants and also the hero is going to run into something, into the Druid, and then he's just going to attack straight ahead, and that's the game. He's just calculating it now. But yeah, that is in fact the game. This is sort of the difference between these two decks. But the interesting thing about this is this was a snowball effect caused by the fact that Savjz decided to not go for board control earlier on in the game. And it really did cost him the game there. I do believe that cost him the game. He shouldn't have gone for that kind of play. He already knew there were Mark of the Wilds in the deck, and he should have played around them. And hello Artosis and Creparium. Yeah, they were commentating over this particular series. But anyway, that game was mainly caused by the fact that Savjz got a very, very good opening, but he decided to go for aggression instead of board control, and it cost him the game. Now, there were 4 games in this series. I'm going to be going over the third game here, which Savjz did in fact win through with his warrior, which was quite impressive. It was a big turnaround. There was a there was a last game, 4th game, which I think was the best game in the series, mainly. However, I am not doing it. Why? Because it is 45 minutes long. And I'm not joking. It could be its own weekly topic. I'm gonna put the link to the actual videos in the description, but the match is larger than the part. There are 3 parts to this series at the moment on ESGN's YouTube channel, and the last game is longer than the part. You go into part 3 and they're halfway through the game. It's completely ridiculous. It was one of the longest games I've ever seen. It went to, I think, 5 or 6 fatigue. It was an absolute crazy game. So I'm not going over that one because that would take way too long, but feel free to go and check it out. Now, Savjz was in fact going first this time. He has Nat Pagal. He also has a Fiery War Axe, Shield Slam, and Ragnarok. So he has a decent hand overall. Good for setting up. Now, Darkwonyx has a crazy hand. Turn 1, Nat Pagal. This is why Nat Pagal has been changed. They both have early Pagals, and this actually almost seals the game for Darkwonyx straight up. He does end up losing this game, but this was a ridiculous amount of luck. So it did look as if there was no way of him losing. But there's the first Pagal draw. So Pagal has already drawn a card. Now in response, we're probably going to see another Pagal. We could also see an Armor Smith and then a Fiery War Axe next turn to kill it, but I think we're just going to see the Pagal. Yeah, I think we're just going to see the Pagal. Pagal is quite difficult to deal with from a Druid perspective until turn 4. Or an Innervate could do it. And probably just going to see hero power on the Pagel. Hero power on the Pagel and pass. Let's think what I would do. Means you can Wrath it next turn. Didn't get the draw off that Pagel, by the way. And it draws again. Now, the commentators at this point were making jokes about this, that if both players have a Nat Pagel, then the person who plays it first has a draw percent of 100% or something. It's just, this is what was happening in this game. There was so many draws coming out of this Pagel, it was ridiculous. Now, I think we're just going to see the Wrath on the enemy Pagel here. We could see an Earthen Ring Forest here, which actually would be better than Harvest Golem in this particular situation because of the Acolyte of Pain. So we could just see an Earthen Ring come out. Which would be a little bit awkward, but we could just see an Earthen Ring. But yeah, the other major option is the Wrath. But you can silence it next turn with the Keeper, so I think we could just see the Earthen Ring come out here. I think I would Wrath it, but we could just see the Earthen Ring. I think the argument behind Wrathing it is you can Wrath the Nat Pagel, and then you can silence the Acolyte of Pain next turn, and your opponent has no card draw at all. So I think I prefer that line. I think I prefer going for the Wrath into Keeper of the Grove next turn. But I'm pretty sure what Darkwonyx is going to go for is the Earthen Ring Forest here. I don't personally agree with it, but I mean I can see the logic behind doing so. Also a third draw from the Pagel. I can see the logic behind going this route, but I don't agree with it. I should imagine we're just going to see an Axe and an Armor Smith. It's the kind of thing where you should expect an Axe coming out here. And if he now his Nat Pagel can actually die to that Axe next turn, whereas it shouldn't be able to. Oh, that's a big draw. I think we see the Cairn. I think we just slam the Cairn. Slam the Cairn. I think that would be the correct decision here. Slam out the Cairn and hope for the best. But yeah, it would have been much better if he had got rid of that board. Because currently he could just silence the Acolyte, and then his opponent would he wouldn't have his Pagel anymore, because the Axe would go straight to the Pagel instead, but he would have a 2-4, and his opponent would have a silenced Acolyte and just would never draw cards ever. So yeah, we're probably going to see the Cairn come out here, and then next turn a Druidal Claw. And the card advantage continues. Oh, there's the Frothing Berserker. We could see Frothing come down here. We could see a second Acolyte of Pain because he needs to draw off these things. But this is a very difficult play. I think Acolyte of Pain might be slightly better than Frothing Berserker in this particular situation. So we're probably going to see Acolyte of Pain come down with an Armor up, take out the Nat Pagel with the Axe, and then just attack for 2. A little awkward, but attacking for 2 might be just the best play here. The other thing he can do is sacrifice his Acolyte of Pain, cycle it out. Appears to be what he's going for. Second Frothing Berserker. So I should imagine we're just going to see the second Acolyte come down here with the armor up. Bit awkward for Savjz. He's drawing his Enrage engine basically. He's drawn every single part of his Enrage engine apart from the Cool Taskmasters. Now the question is, what does he do about this Cairn? He's even contemplating the concede at this point, which is In the end, it wasn't that far over. He does get a fairly lucky draw later on in the game that saves him. But I think we're just going to see the Druid come out here. The Druid. Yeah, I would say we just see the Druid come down and use the Cairn to start picking off things. He could kill the Pagel. The Pagel is sort of his source of card advantage, so I would just kill the Pagel and put down a Druid. Cat form, bear form. Okay, so he's going for the full trades. Take the Armor Smith out, take the Pagel out. Okay, I can see that. There's the Slam. Now, this is one of the single luckiest plays I have ever seen. As far as I remember, he slams his own Acolyte of Pain to draw 2 cards, and he draws a Tinkmaster that then makes the Cairn a squirrel. It's one of the stupidest it's one of the luckiest single plays I have ever seen. The chances of it happening are far, far, far lower than drawing 3 times in a row with Pagel, let's just say that. But yeah, he slams, and then off the second card, I think it happens next turn actually, but it draws him like closer to the net. It draws him closer. Okay, so I think we've got the Shield Slam to take out the 4/4. And cycle out the Acolyte of Pain. Is this the card that isn't? Yeah, it is. Yeah, there's the Tinkmaster. I remember that this was what happened. And Squirrel. It was one of the stupidest luck plays I've ever seen. I don't know what the chances of that are, but someone needs to do the math on that. But that was completely insane. This is one of the problems with Hearthstone, is the sheer amount of variance that was present here. I mean, this has recently been nerfed quite a bit. You can't do this thing with Tinkmaster anymore. But I mean, you can, in this particular situation, you could have. But nowadays, the amount of variance has been decreased a lot, which is good. But this is one of the reasons why it has been decreased, because Tinkmaster comes out and does stupid things like this sometimes. Golden Squirrel as well, by the way. Didn't even know the squirrel had an animation, did you? Now he's giving the Squirrel taunt so that anything like Black Knight can't just get free value. And this is where the game can turn around, because he does have Ragnaros and Alexstrasza in his hand. Now, I think there is an argument for Druid here. I would go Azure Drake and then Wrath the Frothing Berserker. I think that's the play I would go for here. Wrath the Frothing Berserker and then just attack. Looks like he's going to go for the Druid. Okay, he's going to go for the Druid. So he's going to go ahead and clear the board as opposed to keeping spell power. Okay, I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. I think I would have preferred having an Azure Drake on the board at full life, but that's definitely the other play you could have done there. Now, we could see a Ragnaros and Prey, which would be a very, very, very risky play here. Whirlwind Execute is another thing that could be followed here, or Frothing Berserker or Whirlwind, and then execute the 4/1. Is the safest play. He does end up going for Ragnaros Ferrocool, and he has a 50% chance of completely being messed up here. If he hits the Squirrel or the Hero, he's pretty far behind. He does in fact hit the second best target he could have. If he hit the Druid of the Claw there, then that would have been more or less good game. Now, swipe to deal with the Ragnaros into Harvest Golem, I think would be the correct play here. Yeah, I should imagine that swipe is the correct play here. There aren't really any other plays you could go for. I guess you could Ancient of Lore to draw 2. Now, the reason why hitting the Hero would have been probably the worst thing there is simply because if he hit the Hero, then his Alexstrasza would be wasting some value. He's going to go for the massive amount of burst damage. Can he kill it? He's got 4 damage from the Wrath. He can kill it, but then if he does so, he takes 7 damage. So I don't think that's the play he really wants to follow here. I think Ancient Allure healing 5 may be the best play. With just get yourself back up to 21. Get a threat on the board. You do have a scroll with Taunt. But this has actually been more or less a perfect... It's been a perfect set of previous turns for Savjz. He didn't get massively screwed over by the Ragnarok shot. He got very, very lucky on the Tinkmaster. Very lucky that Darkwonyx doesn't have a Tinkmaster, because if he did, he'd be very, very dead at the moment. Are we going to see the Azure Drake and hope? Because if he draws the swipe... Nope, no swipe for you. I should imagine we're just going to see the Yeti come out here, unless he wants to take 7 damage. I think that's a good game, isn't it? Whirlwind. Nope, he's 2 off. Is he? He's got 13 damage. 13 damage in hand. I think you still go for it though. Frothing Berserker, Whirlwind, Cruel Taskmaster, the Alexstrasza, and then just play an Axe. Go straight in for the kill. And execute something. This is a pretty big turnaround for Savjz actually in this particular game. But yeah, it did come down to that Tinkmaster earlier. If he didn't have that Tinkmaster trigger perfectly earlier, he would be very, very far behind. He probably would have lost the game straight there. But this is the power of Tinkmaster. I mean, if that Squirrel was a 5-5 right now, he could not do what he's currently doing. And we're getting some lag, and before anyone says anything, that is not on YouTube's part, that is on the actual video. So there's not much I can do about that. There's actually a lot of lag coming out from this coverage. It was quite laggy on Twitch also when this happened, so I'm not particularly surprised. And that is going to seal the game. Now, it was extremely impressive that that happened. There's no way of living this, from what I can tell. He can... There would be a way of living if Scenario still cost 8 mana, but it doesn't. He can Wrath the 3. I mean, his only out would probably be Ancient of Lore, drawing... What? Sunfury Protector and an Innervate. So he goes Ancient of Lore, Harvest Golem, Innervate, Sunfury. That's a 1 out, but it's very, very unlikely. But that might be his only out. So I think that's what you have to do. He's even going to cycle off it. Ooh, Mark the Wild. Would that do it? Nope, he's still dead. Unless... No, that would do it. I think that would do it. If you kill the 11-2, you then put down Harvest Golem with Taunt. No, still dead. I don't think there's a single way of living. There's not a single way of living. He's 1 mana off everything. 1 mana off living in any circumstance. Yeah, that's a good game. But that entire game, if you actually look at the hand right now, he has no cards in hand. If that squirrel had been a Devilsaur, then this game would have gone very, very differently. Very, very differently. And this is one of the problems with variants. It's one of the reasons I picked this particular game. Is it really does show why Nap Hagel and Tinkmaster were nerfed. They caused way too many swings in that game. First of all, we had the Tinkmaster thing from Darkwonyx, which was more or less unbeatable. Like drawing 3 cards off the Nap Hagel almost won him the game single-handedly. And the only reason Savjz actually managed to turn it around was from drawing 3 cards into a into a Tinkmaster, which then made a Cairn into a Squirrel, which won the game. That's the reason I chose that game. Is I found it kind of funny while watching it, and also a little bit pissed off about it. Because I mean, I naturally while watching this, I was rooting for the Mana Grind guys, because I do know the Mana Grind guys. Especially Darkwonyx is the one I know the best, probably. But I know Reels. I have talked to Chaki in the past. I know Forsen from like a long time ago. So I was rooting for all the Mana Grind guys, and I was sort of face palming while watching this because it was one of the most variance games I've ever seen. 3 triggers in a row of Nat Hagel followed by drawing into Tinkmaster in the only way imaginable to get a squirrel. And then after this, Darkwonyx did end up winning the final game. It was a priest versus warrior, which was 45 minutes long and went into fatigue, into the most ridiculously long game I have ever seen. And I would recommend, if you want to see one game from the entire season, that would be the game to watch. It was the most ridiculous game of Hearthstone I've ever seen, which was quite funny because it came after this one. Basically, in the final game, he won because he drew a Mind Control exactly when he needed it. So we had Tinkmaster and then we had Mind Control. It was a weird series to watch, but the final game didn't really have any misplays in it, so to say. It just had some weird variants come up in it. But overall, out of these 3 games, we really saw Darkwonyx's Druid is what we saw the most here, versus sort of all three different archetypes that Savjz was playing, being a Druid Watcher deck and Rogue Miracle and Warrior. Now, Warrior I think has become one of the best, if not the best deck in the format. I'm not sure if it is the best, but I think it is top tier at the moment. It's the most consistent deck in the format, that's for sure. I don't think it's the most powerful, however. And it just has a lot of tools to use in terms of removal. It has a lot of bombs it can throw down later on in the game. As for the Druid deck, I do think that the Mark of the Wilds, which was the interesting tech card in the Mana Grind version of Druid they took to Fight Night, did work quite well. It was a bit of a sort of heated topic on the actual commentary. They were talking about it, whether it's good, whether it's not. I think it proved actually in the games that it was quite powerful, because anyone on the team who was running Druid was running the Mark of the Wild, and they all worked pretty well. But anyway, I will put the video, as usual, in the description below. I'll put all 3 parts of the video in the description. Thank you all for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback, put it in the comment section below. If you want to come chat to me, I'm usually on Teamspeak. I'll put Mana Grind's information in the description below for the actual Teamspeak address. Anyway, thank you for watching. This has been Jotto, signing off.